Hi and welcome to this video. I'm going to show you how you can use flows to post a message in Slack when a vulnerability is created in AttackForge. Flows is a new module in AttackForge which is purpose-built for automations and integrations. The example in this video is available on our support site, so you can follow along there as well. And separately, if you come to the AttackForge Flows GitHub repository, this example is also available, which you can download from this repository as a flow, and you can then import that into your own AttackForge. And that's just going to help save you a bit of time to get up and running a bit faster. So now let's start by checking out this flow in action. So we're going to jump to a project in AttackForge and go ahead and create a vulnerability. So we're going to search our write-ups to find the vulnerability that we found, and go ahead and select that, and go ahead and also assign the affected assets, and now save that vulnerability. So if we now open Slack, we'll see we just got a notification, and here it's showing us that there was a new vulnerability found, reflected XSS in our project Acme Corp Web App Pentest, also with a link to go and view that vulnerability as well. So let's take a look at how this is working behind the scenes. So we're going to open up the Flows module in AttackForge, and that will be available from the integration section in the main menu if you have access to it. We can see here we have a flow for create Slack message. So we'll go ahead and open that up. And what we'll notice is that there was a run of that flow that happened just now. So that's the message that we just created within Slack. So let's open that up and see what happened. So we can see that this is a vulnerability created flow. So it's firing off on that particular event. And there's only one action, and that action is to post a Slack message. Now, because all of that information that we needed here for this example is really around ratings, vulnerability names, and the project, all of that information is already available within the vulnerability created payload itself. So we can see that the input is all of that vulnerability information, and at this point the output is much the same. So if we click on HTTP tab, we can see what happened when this flow executed. And we can see that the endpoint that our flow was communicating with was the Slack's own chat.postMessage API. Now, this there is detailed information about that API, which I'll get to a little bit later in the video. But we can see that there was a post request that went out, and there was a 200 response that came back. And we can see the information that was sent across, in this case, the channel that we're referring to in Slack, and also the message, including that vulnerability. We can see the request headers as well that we sent across, and we can also see the data that came back from Slack. So here we can see the response headers, but also the response body. And importantly, it's telling us that the result of that request is OK true, which is a good sign that shows that this was actually successful. We can also rely on the logs to give us a bit more information of what's happening. This is where you can have much more verbosity around, for troubleshooting, debugging, and any other sort of information you might need to access when you're testing and also using your flows in the real world. So now let's take a look at what's actually happening within this action. So we're going to open up the flow and click on edit. And again, we'll notice that it's that this flow is built on a vulnerability created event. So in this example, every time a vulnerability is created, we are then going to potentially create a message in a Slack channel. If your use case is, only under certain conditions, maybe the vulnerability has to go through some QA process. Maybe you want those messages posted to Slack at a later point in time, for example, when the project's completed. then your starting point might be a different type of event, whether it's vulnerability updated or project updated or other. But in this example, we're doing it based on when the vulnerability got created. So there's only one action, post Slack message, and we'll see here that it's a post request to this particular URL. Now, if we open up Slack's documentation, we can see a bit more information about the API that we're going to be using. Slack does have many different ways of communicating through different APIs, whether it's incoming webhooks. In this example, we're using their chat API. So we can see what the request is expected to look like. So it should be a post request to this particular URL. And we can see that they're expecting a token to be supplied, which is either a bot token or a user token. And again, you can configure your flow based on which type of tokens that you would want to use as well. We're also going to use the application JSON content type as well to communicate. Although Flows does also support the for URL encoded forms as well if you needed to. So we can see that the Slack API is expecting a token to be supplied, a channel, which is the channel. In this case, it's a sort of this testing channel that we're using, and we can see those IDs within the URL itself. And separately, one of the following, either attachments, blocks, or text. In our example, we're using text, so we're sending some information about the vulnerability as text itself. So let's come back to our action, and we can see that the content type we've opted to use is the application JSON format, so we can go ahead and set that header. And separately, we can go ahead and supply our token as an authorization header. We're using secrets for this one. Flows does support secrets, so you can go in, configure your secrets, and that way we can reference them as well. And in this case, we've set it for the authorization header. So let's open up the request script and see what's happening. Now, you'll notice a few things on this screen. On the right-hand side, we have information about the vulnerability created event payload. So in this case, it's vulnerability information, and it's accessible in our request script using data. So here we can see information about the vulnerability, its assets, affected assets, projects, any write-up data, any other sort of custom fields as well. So you should be able to have all that information you need about the vulnerability already in the payload. However, if you need other data, you can always adjust your flow to go and fetch more data from AttackForge's self-service API or any other external systems that you might need to get data from as well. Now on the left-hand side, we'll see that we have some script here that's going to formulate what the request to Slack is going to look like. You'll notice that it is using AFScript, and AFScript is AttackForge's own scripting and programming language. Now, if it's the first time that you're building a flow, we highly recommend to have a read over AFScript on our support site, just to understand again how it works and some of the possibilities there as well. So we'll notice that it's going to return a request, and we're specifying the body of what we want to send to Slack, and we've set that up as a function. So build request body, and what that function looks like. So we'll notice that there's 3 initial variables that we're setting: the AttackForge project ID, project name, and the channel. The project ID and project name is going to be used because here we can see we need information about the project, so in the project name in particular, and the URL is going to need the project ID So that's why we're going and extracting that information from the vulnerability. The channel itself, I've set that up to be a custom field on the project. So in my configuration for the project fields, I've created a section for integrations, and you'll notice that there's a field set up for the Slack channel. So this means anytime we're setting up a project in AttackForge, we can go ahead and input the Slack channel, or even when we're editing the project at a later point as well. In this case, it is set up as an input field, which means there's only one Slack channel that I want to post it to. But if your use case was there's potentially many, you can go ahead and use a list type if that's going to be more suitable for your use case. So, but the important thing here is we can see the key is called Slack channel. So that's what we want to use in our script to go in and retrieve that information from the project custom fields from the vulnerability itself. So looking further through our script, we can see that we're now starting to formulate the text, and that's what we want to include here within the message itself. So we want to start by having some information about the rating, and that's where we're pulling in the vulnerabilities priority, and then also now having some information about the project too, and that's where we're now referring to that variable to go and use that project name. And lastly, we want to have a URL there, which is then going to point back to the application. So that way the users in Slack can always click the link, and that will take them to go view that vulnerability back in AttackForge. Again, you may not want to disclose too much information within Slack. It's it's a good idea to mention we found a vulnerability, but you need to be authenticated to see all of the sensitive information about it. So we can see now at the bottom that we are returning the channel and the text as well. And again, that is what Slack's API is expecting us to include. And let's take a look at the response script. So if the Slack server comes back with a successful response, so firstly, what we want to do is check that the response has all of the correct information that we're expecting. Now the response is going to be an object that has a status code. So this is the HTTP status code from in this case, the Slack API server, the response headers, and also the response body itself. And again, here we can see again some information about what the responses should look like, and understand again what to expect from the API. And so here what we want to do is firstly check the content type, make sure that it is a JSON response that's coming back, and that's then going to allow us to check whether it's coming back with an OK, which is what we're hoping to see. And in this case, if it does come back with OK is equal to true, then according again to the API documentation, we know that at this point that the flow is, that the chat message has been created. So we can either decide to continue or finish at this point. It's considering there's no further actions needed within this flow. If there has been an error or some other condition here that is not a success, we're going to log that out. And again, that's taking advantage of AF-Script's logging capabilities, so that we can see if there's ever any issues, hopefully what those issues are. So that's pretty much it. It's all you really need to do. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.